morning. Welcome, not to my home. I'm the secondary head teacher at King's Dubai, that most people think is a primary school, and it still is. I've been the secondary head teacher there for a couple of years. Our local context is that we are a small but perfectly formed school inside a primary school. If you took the primary school up and you fall to one end, that's what we are. We're inside that because we're awaiting a new school to be built. And as I say that, I'm sure some of you are just going to gently smile at this as your mouths, because you know that sometimes new buildings in Dubai don't go up quite as quickly as you would hope. So we're still waiting, but we're full of optimism, because you have to be as well. But our new school is going to be ready for moving into, well, we're building two new schools. One will be ready in January and the other one in September. Hello, welcome. In the secondary school at the moment, therefore, we only have Year 7 and Year 8. It's really very, very small. The students are mostly coming out of the present primary school, but some other students have come in from overseas. When we move next year, if everything goes according to plan, we'll be moving in September next year, and then suddenly we'll expand quite dramatically. But for the moment, it's only Year 7 and Year 8. And that gives you something of an opportunity. Now, I was enjoying listening to the previous presentation because there are lots of really interesting similarities. And I like to use analogies. I think analogies work for human beings. I think we're naturally storytellers, aren't we? And we like stories. So I like to tell stories through pictures or similar things. The minds of a perfect curriculum being like a perfect meal, very appropriate for Dubai. And I think that some of the food that I'm going to show you is similar to some of the food that was shown in the last presentation. We're doing similar things in slightly different ways. We are an English National Curriculum School. That is our mission. So I've done it in the form of a recipe. I'm very lucky in that my employers were quite generous in really giving me free play in how to put in front of our students a curriculum that motivates, excites, enriches, and is relevant. And what we tend to say is that we deliver the English National Curriculum. A previous school I was a head teacher at was an IB school, so I know the IB relatively well. I should hope I do. And I love the IB, and I've stolen bits of it that I think work for me, but I've obviously changed the form and the name so that I'm not guilty of causing any kind of problems. But we've taken, and if you look through that, you'll see I've actually stolen quite a few things. So quite a few parts of my recipe, my food, are taken from other places in order to enrich what we have, which is the English National Curriculum. So we have aspects of a concept-based curriculum that I'll talk about in a second, an inquiry-based curriculum, a competence curriculum, all the things you just heard about. All mixed in this interesting bowl of this interdisciplinary curriculum that's a tiny bit different to the model you heard about just now, but again has some similarities. Do you have subject specialists? It's very important. It's interesting what's important to parents, isn't it? Very important. One of the things I look forward to about a child going to the secondary school, do you have subject specialists? I want somebody with a long beard who's going to teach my child history, like when I was at school. And I say, yes, we do have subject specialists, but your question's not enough. Because I said, here's a stereotypical history teacher, one of those wonderful people who taught us history when we were at school. The kind of person who gets out of bed in the morning and just lives and dreams of emperors and queens and kings and battles and dates and things like that, and imparts onto all his or her students this love for history. You remember the kind of person, and maybe that's why we did history at university. I think I've lost now, haven't I? But that kind of person, as wonderful as they are as a teacher, is not good enough for Year 7 and Year 8. It's not enough. People often ask me now and in the past, why are students in the UK so bad at writing when they leave school? And I say, you're right, they are. They should be much better. But the answer is pretty simple. Because a student in England has approximately 12 different teachers. Only one of them teaches them how to write. Now you can say that the others do, and it's quite important that the science teacher and the PE teacher and the geography teacher, etc., it's quite important that they teach children aspects of writing, but come on, they don't really, like an English teacher does, they don't really talk about text cohesion and use of subordinate clauses and a range of language. They don't, because it's not really integral to their assessments, is it? Whereas for the English teacher, it's their raison d'etre, it's what they're marking the work for. Okay? In Year 7 and Year 8, every teacher must be a teacher of literacy. Every teacher must be a teacher of numeracy, and of computing, ICT, and of PSHE. They've got to be that kind of human being. And the kind of people that I need in my team who are teaching Year 7 and Year 8 are those kinds of people. I don't want that wonderful history teacher unless he's also a teacher of English and Maths and Science and ICT and PSHE. It just doesn't work enough. And typically, nice little link to the previous presentation, typically those kinds of people are people with upper primary experience because it's what they do. So they're just used to doing that kind of thing. Okay? Still worries the parents a bit. Is he a subject specialist? Yes, he is. One of my maths teachers last year teaching students formulas for maths would take his keyboard out and I'd find him playing music and they would be singing stuff. That's the kind of person you want in your 7 and your 8, isn't it? That's the kind of human being we're after. I learnt a lot in my previous headship about how different American schools are to British schools, and some of you will get this because having worked in British schools for all my life, where you would quite happily teach year 13 when you go out and you come out of your year 13 lesson doing something quite cerebral and deeply meaningful like Hamlet, and you come down and your year 7s would bounce down the corridor and just say, oh, we're doing drama today, and you quite enjoyed that, didn't you? That was fun, the fact you had this nice contrast. So when I started my previous headship and I had some North American teachers come in, one of the first questions they would say to me is, Bill, how many preps do I have? And I didn't understand what they're talking about. What is a prep? I said, I don't know. How many do you have? Tell me. Well, you tell me. You're giving me the prep. I'm giving you preps? Right, tell me what they are and I'll tell me how many you can have. And a prep, as you may know, is that if you're taking a year 7 class or grade 6 class in the American system, if you take 3 of them, you can effectively teach the same program to all 3 classes, differentiated. But that's one prep. And teachers I would work with typically expect a relatively small number of preps, which kind of surprised me, having come out of England and being quite used to doing 7 preps, not even knowing that they were called preps. And suddenly thinking, goodness me, I've been working so hard on my life, perhaps I didn't have to work quite so hard. But I quite like that American notion of teachers kind of specialising in certain parts of the curriculum. It's less common in British schools. And I'm developing an okayness with that idea of maybe we'll employ people who only work, like IB diploma teacher or A-level teachers, only work at the top end, and they can have those long beards and be just dream about emperors and kings and queens. They don't need them to do the stuff that they need them to do in year 7 and year 8. And I think this is absolutely crucial. It is, and here's another theme from the previous presentation, parental perception is so much here, isn't it? Because they do worry about it a little bit. And I said, that's the kind of human being I need to teach your children. That's the kind of person who works really well in year 7 and year 8. I used to be an English teacher, and I always remember the students saying to me, Mr. Turner, why am I studying poetry? How's that going to help me get a job? Or you could say the same with Shakespeare. You could say the same with anything. Students who didn't quite get the relevance of what they were doing. One of the things that I like about a concept-based curriculum, and I'll talk to you very briefly of how we do that, is the fact that you don't have that, do you? Because by teaching through the concept initially, by making the concept clear to a student, you make the connection with their personal life. And I'll give you a typical example that I use in explaining this with parents, how this works for us. And I talk about this example here, the Industrial Revolution. Who could argue with the fact that the Industrial Revolution in England in the 18th century wasn't quite important? I mean, it's just changed all of our lives. It's affected what we do today, isn't it? We can't say that's not a good unit of work to do. That's very, very important. But however good a teacher you are, I would suggest that if you go into your classroom at the beginning of a new unit and you say to the children, all right, today we're going to look at 18th century England, the northwest of England. I'm not sure many of those students would be thinking, yes, I'm so excited about this. This is going to be great. I'm not sure they would. If you take the approach of a concept-based curriculum, forgive me if I'm teaching grandmasters like eggs here, but if you start off by saying to students, technology, okay, technology, does it always change people's lives for the better? Does it always change people's lives for the better? What do you think? Now, that's just question number 1. I've already started hooking people, haven't I? Just because, no because. Okay, let's narrow it down. Does it always change people your age? Does it change your life for the better? What about your parents? What about your sister, your baby sister? What about your grandparents? What about Dubai? What about? And then you start to talk about the technologies they have. I mean, they've all got mobile phones and laptops and things, haven't they? So they can relate to the concept. They personalise the concept. And we know that to make learning meaningful and to resonate and to stay with us forever, then you have to link learning to children's own lives. So before you talk about 18th century England, you've talked about the concept of technology, okay? And a guiding question, very IB again, a guiding question. Does technology always change people's lives for the better? And you've hooked children, haven't you? You've made it relevant to them. You won't have them saying, what's the point in learning about the Industrial Revolution? Because you said this is about technology. That's our lens that we're looking through. Like we're going to look at the Industrial Revolution through the lens of technology and answer this guiding question, this hook. Does it always change people's lives for the better? The context is the Industrial Revolution, but that's the concept. And that's my motto, TUBA, T-U-B-A, when we ask ourselves, is that a concept? Is it, if we take technology as an example, is it timeless? Yes. Is it universal? Yes. Is it broad? Very. Is it abstract? Yes. So therefore a child can apply that concept across cultures and times and places and to him or herself. So that's one core ingredient of our Year 7 or 8 curriculum. Now when we talk to children and to parents about what we do here, we talk about the analogy of learning muscles like a gym, and we say if your mum and your dad don't go to the gym for a couple of months and then they suddenly go to the gym, they're likely to pull a muscle because they're not exercising their muscles regularly. It's the same thing with these kinds of competencies, these learning muscles. If you don't exercise them regularly, then you're going to pull a brain muscle, a learning muscle. So your child, if they are going into year 10 and they've never had an opportunity to lead, and you say, I want you to lead something, they're going to struggle, aren't they, because they haven't had the opportunity to do that. Now the way we deliver these is that they like the IB learner profile, they suffuse everything, they're in everything, whether the students are playing football or on a residential or learning maths. If I as a teacher, an English teacher for example, when I am constructing a unit of work, I will identify 3 or 4 competences that will feature significantly in that specific unit of work. Okay? And when I start the unit, I will ask children to reflect upon what they know about and how skilled they feel they are in applying those competences. So it could be time management, coping with change, and risk-taking, whatever. During the unit, I give students opportunities to reflect upon that, and I highlight how these are a feature of this unit of work. And subsequently, at the end of the unit, they reflect back on how they've applied them. Okay? Now that's a basic model of how we do it. Our assessment calendar is in quarters. I've stolen this from American schools. Most American schools that I know of seem to work this way. I like it. Not dependent upon the moon, that's why I like it. So our school year is broken into quarters. In quarter 1 and quarter 2, we have a traditional parents' evening. English, maths, science, geography, history, and PE, they're lucky. And the parents go to all of those. In quarter 2 and quarter 4, we have a student-led conference. IB practice. Fantastic, aren't they? Brilliant. Just transformational events. And in our student-led conference, where, as many of you will know, the student leads the session, they've prepared a range of work to show mum and dad, but they've also spent the best part of a week reflecting upon what these pieces of work show about them as a learner. And they use this language. So that's when they articulate this language in order to mum and dad to reflect upon their journey to that point of time. And as in all good student-led conferences, parents are blown away by the fact that their 12-year-old sounds like a 22-year-old. I think that when the first time I came across a student-led conference, I thought, why did no one show me this before? They're fantastic. So that's our main outcome as far as the competences go. We don't do tests in them or anything like that. They're suffused within. But that's the one time they don't get grades or anything like that. But that's when students reflect and articulate their learning, their competences. Our 6 interdisciplinary subjects I listed there, I have on the top there: science, computing, design, technology, art, history, and geography. Now, those are our ID subjects. As you know, when you're constructing a secondary timetable, it's a bit of a bun fight, isn't it? Once you've timetabled your Arabic and your English and your maths, there's not a lot left. And every subject is very, very important. And how do you find the best way of putting those subjects in? And there's a really good model that we saw in the last presentation, a very good way of doing that. We do it slightly differently, but it has some similarities. Those 6 subjects, the ID subjects, we only teach at 2 points in the year. Only 2 points in the year. But in that time when we teach them, over a 3-week period, the students get 18 hours of it. Okay, so they get, in an individual week, they'll get 3 double lessons, 6 hours a week, and 6 hours the next week, and 6 hours the next week. So in that unit of time, those 3 weeks, they get 18 hours. It's a bit like the difference between a very watered down coffee and a double espresso. It's very, very rich. Now, why do we do that, and what difference do we find it make? We do that, when we planned it originally, the main thinking behind that was to encourage and push and cajole teachers to think connectedly in the way I was talking about before. So if I'm delivering a history unit, I've got time to also make sure I'm incorporating literacy and numeracy and personal social and computing. It obliges me to do that, and maybe thinking about connection with geography or other curriculum subjects. What we also found was quite interesting, was less expected, is that if you imagine a student in, I don't know, December, you give a student, in many secondary schools, because of the tightness of a timetable, they'll have 1.5 hours of a subject a week to take geography, 2 hours if you're lucky. If you take that subject all the way through to December, and you say to the student, we're doing some kind of summative assessment now to look back at what you've been doing since September, that's pretty tough for an 11-year-old, isn't it? Most 11-year-olds don't really think back on the previous weekend that much. It's quite difficult for them to really recall and get back inside what they did in September. Now, if you do the ID unit in the way that we're planning it, it's a 3-week unit. And so they're doing formative assessments during, but if somewhere towards the end of it, towards the end of week 2, they're moving towards their summative assessment for that unit, they can remember everything they've been doing because it was only a week and a half before. I think that's one of the reasons. Not only because they've been engaged with the learning, because it's been really well taught, it's enriching and exciting and relevant, but also because they can remember it all, because it was done so recently. So whether they're putting together a product to give a presentation about we have a Golden Age of Islam, a unit we do in history, whether they're doing that or the corresponding geography unit, where they're writing a report, a literacy-based report about Dubai for an investor about should I build a hotel here. They're having to know about labour patterns and politics and the economy at the moment, and they're putting all together in a report. We're looking at the products the kids are doing. It's a written one and this is a spoken one with some creativity in the product they make. They're thinking, goodness me, this is really amazing. Students are producing things that are much, much better than I had expected them to produce. So the student, for example, who produced the report in Dubai, 2 of our students last year got grades that were GCSE grades in Year 7. And for those students, that was extraordinary. Because I looked at what they were doing in English, and it wasn't nearly as good. And I thought, how's that happen? That's really interesting. That made me realise how I mustn't put ceilings on children. But if somehow things work really well together, they can really do something incredible. And they had to find lots of information about it, and their next step was that they had to write different texts for different audiences. So a couple of these are, I think, one of these is written for children, and one is written for adults, and one is fun facts and other things like that as well. Now that's a really good literacy task, isn't it? Because you think, as with my English teacher hat on, I'm thinking form, purpose, audience. That's a very meaningful task. I'm writing one for adults, I'm writing one for children. It's an informative text to tell them that apart. And the next thing they had to do was to learn how to the technology of QR, quick reader. See if people are nodding. These things here that you've no doubt seen all over the place, they look like little hashtagging things, don't they? And they had to learn the technology for those, and then they had to turn their piece of writing into a QR reader. So as a real purpose, it's a meaningful task. It's a science unit, but it's also English, isn't it? And it's also ICT. Okay, it's all enmeshed together. And people visited the park, they take their iPhones out, they take their iPads out, and as you may know, you just put it over that, and suddenly the text appears on your screen. And so when a unit goes really, really well, that's what happens. Now, the final slide I'm going to show you is, am I allowed to say I'm not a big fan of the KHDA? I don't really mean that. I mean, I'm not a big fan of KHDA inspections, because nobody is, are they really? It's about as much fun as having an operation, let's be honest, isn't it? Like a serious operation. But when they came to visit us last year and they saw what we were doing, they did say something that I thought, well, thank you. I'm really glad you saw what I'm trying to do, what we are trying to do as a team. And inquiry-based learning, to put it really simply, is learning that is rather than when I was at school, when you were sat and you received information. inquiry-based learning is where I am obliged to probably set the task myself and even to work out what my methodology is going to be in order to discover what I need to discover, rather than being given a methodology or being that kind of thing. So I become the inquirer. I'm an active learner.